Hi, today we're going to be talking about the arrays in function. That's section 2 of Savitch C++ edition 10. So the first part, I broke it down into two parts. The first part, we're talking about the arrays and function argument. We're going to pass arrays to functions. And as you recall, we are going to be looking at writing functions for everything. Okay, so first, before we get to that, we know that if we define an array, if we declare an array, in this case, we have array of 10 elements. Okay, so first thing first, my index starts at 0, ends at 9. So I should not access a index 10. And we talk more detail about it. But what we're talking about here is, in this case, I have a function that's going to be receiving one number, one integer. So if that's the case, I can just pass one of my elements in my array. So I can take one of the elements. Remember, if I put a number in my bracket for my array, that's one element. Of course, I can put a variable on it, or generally we use the variable on it because generally we use it in a for loop or things similar to that. So that is the way that you can pass one element at a time. But generally, when we're working on arrays, we are not passing one element of the array, we are passing the whole array. So what we're talking about in this section is generally how we can pass the whole array, entire array. So when we're putting array as a parameter, we are going to be not calling it as call by value. Remember, call by value in the function that's coming in from chapter 4, that is making a copy of it and send it. That's not the way we're going to do it with arrays. It is not called by reference, but it is very similar to call by reference. So we can think about it as like call by reference, even though it is not exactly that, but that's what we think. Call by reference is what? We are sending the address of the variable, not the actual variable. And then the function can change that inside the function. So that's what we're talking about. So how do we do it? So when we send an array to a function, we're going to talk more about it. First thing first, when we put it as a parameter, it's going to have a brackets, empty bracket. Remember, if I put a number inside of it, I am passing one element. The most mistake that we can have seen is we passing it like int a 10. So if I do something like that, what am I doing? First of all, index 10, if my array size is 10, index 10 is outside of my array. So I am taking something outside of my array and I'm sending it into the function. So we're going to be careful with that. We should have it as empty bracket. And we also need to pass size. We're going to talk the reason that why are we passing the size of an array to a function. So this is going to be for my declaration and definition. It's going to have a brackets with nothing in it. So that's another thing that we have to remember for arrays. So how do we declare it? We're going to put the empty bracket. We're going to pass the size of array. Why? Because function, when we're passing array into a function, it knows where is it starting, it knows its data type, but it doesn't know where is it ending. and that can be actual beneficial to us. We're going to talk about it in the next section, that why is that beneficial to us. So we need to pass the size. We will learn some other ways of doing arrays in future course. It's called dynamic array. We're going to get to that. So we're going to declare it this way. Now we're going to have, so the declaration definition is going to have brackets, empty bracket. Now, if I want to call this function, when I call this function, I am going to use just the name of the array. It does not have any bracket. It doesn't have anything else. So for declaration definition, I'm going to have a square bracket, empty square bracket. When I'm calling it, it does not have any bracket. It's just the name of the array. That's the way we're going to call it. So declaration definition have bracket. When we're calling the function, it does not have any bracket. Now, here I put a global constant variable as number of scores, and then I created a local variable number of scores. So conventionally, your constant variable, it's all uppercase. Generally, we're doing it above main as a global, that we can use it everywhere. I am suggesting not to use globals all over the place, because you're going to make your function dependent to that global variable, which is okay, because in your next course, you'll learn about putting your top of your main in another file, like .h file, that you can pass it on with your functions. But here for now, we're going to pass that to the function. So when we're calling a function, we are going to be calling it with the name of the array and the size of the array. Now, I could potentially pass my constant variable as a parameter for my function. We will practice in 7.3 that this number of scores can potentially change as a partial field array. But for now, we just keep it this way. So we no bracket, and we need the size when we're calling a function. So to look at this one, first thing first, when you're creating a function declaration, you need to put all the comments for it. I still have students that they are not putting any comments. Remember, the people who want to use your function, the only thing that they see is going to be this section. They don't see your code. So we will not give them the code. So based on this, they have to know what is coming into the function, what is going out of the function, what is this function doing. So by just reading your comment, they should be able to figure that out. So for those who are not putting enough comments, be sure you do that. So we have this fill up function that we're going to be creating. So we are going to have in our declaration and in our definition, we're going to be using brackets. We will need the size to go in it. So in this case, we are asking to enter this many numbers. So if my array was 10, it would say 10 numbers. If it was 20, it would say 20. So we are using this variable because any number can come in here. Remember, reading the number is not part of this function. It's just going to know the size and the array, and it's going to go create a for loop, and the for loop is going to be based on the size. So that size can change in the future. I'm not worried about it if it's 5, 10, 15, 20. All I know is whatever size you give me, I'm going to ask for that many numbers, and I'm going to go up to that many number to ask the user, and then I'm going to be reading it. So this for loop is going to go, if my size was 10, this for loop is going to go 10 times. If my size was 15, it would go 15. And then it's going to deduct 1 from the size to say what was the index of the last one. Remember, your last index is always 1 less than your size. So if my size was 10, my last index was 9. That's what it's printing. It's not necessary to print that, it's just doing it. So generally your fill up function wouldn't have these 2 lines at the end. Just that's the way it's going to fill up. So when we are declaring, when we are defining our functions, we are going to use arrays with empty bracket. When we are calling our functions, remember, we have to declare above main, we have to define below main, and we're going to call somewhere either in the main or in other functions. So we can call functions in other functions, but you're going to be careful that you're not going to have too many levels. So a typical software engineering hint is you don't go deep more than 3 levels. It's going to be your loop, it's going to be your function calls. So if you have a function call inside a function call inside a function call, then you might want to reconsider. So it's not going to go too deep. So once again, when we declare, when we define, it's going to have brackets. When we call, no brackets. We need the size for it. So that's the difference between declaring and calling the function. Now, we are putting the array in an argument. So when the argument of array is passed to the function, the array can be changed inside the function. So just like call by reference, whatever changes that happens inside the function is going to affect the array itself. So when we creating an array, remember the previous section, we talked about how to create array. So when declaring array, what do? We're going to give it a data type. We're going to give it a name. We're going to give it a size. So example was, let's say int, the score, and then we would have bracket 10. So the computer knows the data type. It knows how many elements does it have. And of course, it knows about the whole size because that's what it's going to create. So if my int size is 2 byte, it's going to go and reserve 10 times 2, 20 byte in the memory. Of course, nowadays, the computers are much longer than that. So we are not using 2 bytes, we are using 8. We're moving on to 16 one day. So that's what the computer will know. So it knows the base type, it knows the address of the first index, and it knows the number of index variable. So when you declare a variable in the data portion of your program in the memory, there is going to be a location that that variable is going to be created, and the name of that variable is going to be containing the address of what it is in the memory. And the same thing is going to happen with the arrays. So the name of the array is going to know the address of that array in the memory. Now, when we're passing this to a function, it doesn't know where the end of the array is. That is on purpose. It's something that it's beneficial to use it, but we got to be careful we don't fall off the array. Remember, C++ does not check if you're outside of your array. Languages like Java will check that. C++ doesn't check it for the array. So all it knows is where is the first one and what is the data type on it. That's all it knows. So that means your array size is not known to your function. So your function doesn't know what the array size is. So that's one of the reasons that we are passing the size to the array, because it doesn't know where the size of the array is. Of course, we're going to be learning some dynamic arrays. We're going to learn vectors in this class, and we're going to learn pointers and pointer to arrays next class. And then you know how to go about finding the size of your array, which is dynamic array. But for now, we don't know the size of it when you send it to the function. So one of the reasons that we can do that, and we want to do it, 7.4, we just saw about how we're using the fill up function to fill up the function. Now I can use the same fill up function to pass a score with size 5. I can use the same one with the time and 10. So I have an array called the score that has a size of 5. I can call that fill up function to fill it up with 5 elements. And I can have some other arrays with different size, and I can call the same function with the different name and different size, and it will work. That's the way we're going to create our functions. So that's what I have for the part 1 of this section. And I have some questions over here. Hopefully we're going to have some time to go over these as an activity in the class. If not, practice it to be ready for your test later on. And if you have any questions, let me know in a DQ or however you want to reach me, and we can talk about it. Okay, so you can put a pause on it, go over these, and be sure that you can do it, write it down. Sometimes we think that we know it, but when you write it down or explain it to somebody, talk to somebody about it. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Okay, so I am going to stop right here.